Folks, I regret. I am filled with regret. I ate my weight and then some of turkey, of stuffing, of pecan pie, and even grabbed a slice of pumpkin pie so that I could take it, look at it in all its glory, and then throw it in the trash where it belongs. Thanksgiving was absolutely amazing, but we're back with a fresh dumpster fire of a podcast for your ear hole. Not another Baptist podcast. We're back again. I'm joined with Kyle Bierman, the pastor of First Baptist Alamogordo. I am Matt Hensley, the pastor of Mayhill Baptist, and we're in two completely different climates. It's getting a little colder here, but it's getting downright frigid up on the mountains, though we're only separated by about 40 miles. We're thrilled that you decided today to pull up a chair and talk about church revitalization, church planting, and other goodies that we typically discuss here on this train wreck. And so the first question I got, my brother, is how was Thanksgiving?
Man, let me tell you, I ate my body weight in fried turkey and then, yes, in pumpkin pie.
Don't do it.
The manna from heaven that is pumpkin pie with maybe equal parts whipped cream. But yeah, it was amazing.
I kind of like to just scrape off the whipped cream and just eat, eat that myself. It's just amazing. Then I can just look at it and, like I said, just throw it in the trash where it belongs. Just skip the middleman. Just throw it in the trash. Throw it in the toilet. Whatever you want to do. But it doesn't belong in your mouth. Well, we had a great time. I drove, as I said, you flew, but I drove to the great Republic of Texas to see family for the first time since Christmas. Had a great time. We ate. We hung out with old friends. We ate. We took naps. We ate. We hung out with old friends to go eat. And
there's a pattern developing.
There's a little pattern there. And also now I'm preparing to preach at Inglewood Baptist this Sunday. Cool. And then I'm sure that's going to include more eating. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that will definitely be in the deal. But you get the idea. It was a whole lot of eating, a little bit of napping, some football thrown in there, but ultimately a great time of family, friends, seeing people we haven't seen in a while, and I'm looking forward to being back in the pulpit at my own church, but looking forward to this Sunday at Inglewood for sure.
Cool. So this is my favorite Sunday of the year. Do you know why that is?
Let's see. You're going to take communion with pumpkin pie.
Ooh. Hey, that's an idea.
You haven't thought about it.
I will put that on the back
church
burner.
Revitalization.
That's an idea right there, man. Coffee and pumpkin pie.
Yeah.
And I might have to get my resume ready before I do that one. No, this is my favorite Sunday of the year because this is when we get to start Advent. And if it was up to me, we would have the tree up in July. So the fact that we wait this long, that's about as long as I can wait. So I'm excited.
That shows a little self-control.
It is. It's self-control. Absolutely.
You would start Advent on like November 1st if you could.
Yes.
Like we'll just do the whole month. That's whole 2 months of Advent. And I can't imagine how many candles that would involve.
That's right. That would be a lot of candlelight every Sunday. Fire hazard. Yeah, no, that's
well, I have the joy of preaching at Inglewood. It holds a special place in my heart, as it was a church that I not only had the privilege of leading their students in their education ministries, but I also went there and was somewhat forced against my will to go back to school, go back and get my seminary degree. And it was also where I was at when I first became a dad. And so we had our first foster placement there. And then later, the 4 girls that we were able to adopt. And so this church had a special place because not only did they let me serve their students, be a part of their family ministries, and really taking it beyond just a silo of here are our students, we're going to play games, we're going to do whatever, and really involve the whole family into what we were trying to do. But they also really believed in me and encouraged me to continue the seminary degree. And we're there on the ups and downs of foster care and offering to watch kids for us or giving us gift cards to McDonald's, all kinds of stuff, just to really show that they cared about what we were doing, not just as their youth pastor, fake pastor as that may be, but as a dad and as a student and all of that. But I get to go there this Sunday in the middle of their missions emphasis. We talked about this a few weeks ago. They're in the throes of their missions emphasis where they really pull all of their money for the year, where you would normally have Annie and Lottie and all of those different things. They bring it together just for a couple of months, and will bring several $1,000s together. And I consider it a privilege to get to preach there this Sunday. It's not something I take for granted at all. Awesome. And I'm looking forward to seeing what all God does in, through, and in spite of all of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. We've got a church in our past that's it's that way too, where we had our own kids and had our 2 kids and loved on us through that. Which brings us to our topic today, because you're a dad of 4 girls. I'm a dad. I have a 10-year-old son and 8-year-old daughter. And so our topic today is not kids ministry, but rather kids in ministry. So in other words, what on earth do we do with kids in the church? And so what does that look like in your context right now? How does that work?
Yeah, for every church, there's going to be a different model for children's ministry. Right. And so what we're really trying to talk about in this episode is specifically kids in the church. Right. So, are they in it? Do you send them all out? Do you send them all the way out until they're, seniors in high school? And then now you can come back to church. You're grown enough. How do we make sense of it? And so it's really not so much about children's ministry as much as our kids. Are they in church, out of church? Right. Is there a sermon form? Is there an activity sheet form? All of those sorts of things. But for every church, there's a different model. What we do is very likely not what you do. Right. And what we do is very likely not the best way or the only way. And so we're not remotely saying that today. We're just saying what is working for us, what we're going to do in our churches. But at Mayhill, we've tried our best, I believe, to bring together a lot of the different models that are out there, and the best of each of those, what I've seen in my ministry career, the things that have worked well, and so let's bring that, things that maybe didn't work so well, let's maybe cut that, and then of course some of the things that we've seen that were totally and completely unacceptable. One of the first churches I served, my very first Sunday as their student pastor, I look around in the middle of the worship service and I don't see any kids, or I don't see any students. I'm like, well, I've really got a difficult job here. Where are my students? And no, they were there. They were just in the back in what they called student church. And that was something I'd never heard of. I'd heard of kids' church, all that kind of stuff. But this student church was not so much we're going to prepare them for worship. They were playing Nintendo 64 and eating cheese puffs. And so that obviously ended that Sunday. Right. Yeah. That was our last time to do it. And so we ended up realizing that and seeing how the church really had viewed the students as a liability than anything else. And so they weren't a part. Out of the sight, out of the mind. We don't want anything to be up there. And so, but growing up in First Baptist in Grand Prairie, we had so-called big church. Maybe you remember this
big
growing
church.
up.
I still use that term.
This was big church and little church, or kids church. And we used the church's chapel where we had weddings and that sort of a deal, where we would come together, just the kids with our associate pastor. We would sing some hymns. He would share a sermon. We would take the offering, all of the things that would be in a regular church service on kind of a shortened version of it for the kids ministry, and for the kids there to really prepare them for what they would experience in big church. So then they're used to sitting down, or then standing, and then sitting down, and then standing, all of the different things that are in there. Right. And so me and all of my redheaded ADHD squirrel glory, I was able to learn how to be an active part of the worship service, not just a spectator, because we were really taught not to just sit and shut up, although my mom would say that very often, and I deserved it, but also how to be a part of, and to sing and to give, to really listen and take notes. And so in subsequent churches that I served, there was typically something like that, something completely different, or maybe absolutely nothing, and all points in between. Right. And so we've tried to take some of those and bring that into Mayhill, but I've kind of dominated the conversation at this point. Before we talk really about Mayhill, what's Alamo doing?
Yeah, so right now we have our kids are in the worship service for the music worship. So they come in during the announcement time, during musical worship, and then they're dismissed right before the message. And they go down to our fellowship hall, and they do kind of a kids' church type thing with some activities. There's a brief message, all that. And that goes kindergarten, I believe all the way up to 6th grade is what we do. So from 7th grade on, or excuse me, through 5th grade, because our students start at 6th grade. 6th grade on, they're in the worship service with us. And kind of like you, I've seen everything in between, all the way through where in my ministry, where kids had kids church, but then some of the youth were allowed to go in. So I mean, you had 7th, 8th, in some cases 9th, 10th graders that were in the kids church. I've seen where they called it kids church, but really they showed VeggieTales. So there was really no kids ministry. So like you said, while it's not perfect, I'm okay with the way we're doing it right now. Certainly open to tweaking that in the future as we look at some other stuff. But I'm okay with kids they worship with us, and then during the message time they go out, which really allows me, talking to primarily adults, to address some topics that I would be wary of addressing with kids in the room. So as it stands right now, yeah, it's okay. But how about Mayhill?
Let's be honest though. This allows your kids to miss out on the absolute worst part of your Sunday morning.
Sure.
Like, they get to sing, and then they don't have to listen to copy. See, I'm afraid to do that in Mayhill, because not only would the kids leave, I feel like probably half of our church would.
I gotta go help with the kids.
Yeah, we're gonna get out of there. And so I'm a little worried about that. But we're somewhat similar. We have a nursery for the itty bitty kiddos, and it's certainly not a requirement. We do have some of the itty bitties that come into the regular worship service, but the rest are welcomed to stay. There are some things for them to do during the worship service, specifically after the music, if it's something that they want. But they're ultimately encouraged to stay through the end. And we've added a bulletin that's just for them that we actually got from the Church Revitalization Roundtable. I don't remember who gave it to us.
Matt Thackerson, First Baptist
Matt Thackerson. Big old shout out to the other Matt.
Phenomenal resource.
The true and better Matt.
That's right.
At this point, because we use it and our kids love it. They're able to write the main idea, what maybe words that they don't understand. They can draw a little bit. And what we encourage our parents to do is, hey, have a conversation about that bulletin with your kids. Like, what did you learn? What was the main idea? What were some things you want to know more about? What didn't you understand? That sort of a deal. And it seems to be working for us right now. Cool. And it's a joy to really see during the midst of a sermon when, I typically have 2 to 3 points. And when I see one where some kids' eyes just really open up, like they got that. Absolutely. Like there's plenty of stuff that it's a little over their head, but I think we often forget how much that a young mind can grasp. I mean, they can get some of it, even if they don't get all of it. And so that's one of the reasons that we encourage them to be there, because they are getting something. And so that's kind of how we've done it at Mayhill. Talk to us, Kyle.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I saw that in the church that I served in Clayton, New Mexico, before we moved down here about 1.5 years ago. We didn't have a children's church time. So my kids were in the service. And I would always I try not to pay attention to them too much for fear that I'm going to get distracted. You might understand that as a pastor.
I know exactly.
So I try not to pay attention to my own family when I'm preaching.
How cold and distant.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. But they were, so they would be like squirming, and I could see my wife, at times kind of like on her last nerve with them. But then like later in the day, I would say something, or they would hear something on the radio and be like, hey, Dad talked about that in his message this morning, and just blow us away because we didn't think they were paying attention at all. When in fact, in the middle of their coloring or squirming or whatever, they're paying far more attention than we have been. So, another way to do this, just kind of talking through different models, is to include like a children's sermon time during the main worship service, where we don't send the kids out, but they stay in, and you just kind of include them in the service in one point or another. Have you ever done anything like that?
Yeah, I actually did in my last pastorate, but it seemed to almost become more about the adults watching the kids and maybe moms. I'm sure your wife would maybe wonder this too, that is my kid going to be the one that picks his nose or something like that?
My kid would absolutely be that kid.
So. And so it became more about watching the kids, and really the kids actually getting something out of what I was saying. It was okay. But also, as we've shared in other episodes, we kind of have some time restraints in Mayhill
Right.
That adding another 5 and then the minutes of getting them up there, minutes to get them back and so forth, it really wasn't going to work for us now. And so I just try to keep in mind as I'm preparing my sermons that I've got people that have been there in the church, raised in the church, have been a Christian for 50 some odd years. What is some truth in this text that they need to hear? And what's something that my 6-year-old Gracie needs to hear? And there's plenty of times in the middle of a sermon that I say, kids, y'all hear me on this. And I'll throw something out just for them, whether or not it's really a point in the sermon as much as something that I want them to actually hear. And so what about y'all? Have you done the children's sermon
so
thing?
I have. There have been a couple of times special services, Christmas. In fact, our Christmas Eve service this year, Christmas Eve morning, we're gonna have everybody in there. We're not gonna send them back to kids' church, so I'll do a children's sermon.
They have to hear your sermon.
Right, that's right. Yes, I'm gonna punish my own kids for Christmas by making
Merry
them stay
Christmas,
in there.
kids.
That's right.
Love you.
But I've seen that time abused as well, where the pastor isn't really addressing the kids. He's really taking that as an opportunity to preach to the adults again. And I just think that's an abuse of that time. If you're going to make it focused on the kids, don't ignore them while they're sitting around you. And like we've said, look, we're not experts by any means, right? And so, if you have other ideas, we'd love to hear those because you may have like the secret to children's ministry that we haven't, or kids in ministry that we haven't figured it out yet. So man, comment on the Facebook page. We would love to hear those things. Here's the fact, right? When you have kids in the worship service and when you have kids in church, things get interesting really quickly with kids. They can be messy, they can be disruptive, but listen, that is awesome. And as one of the guys who's attending our church has told me time and time again, if you're not crying, you're dying as a church. And so listen, the messiness and the disruptiveness that comes from having kids is a blessing, because there are countless churches around here who would love to have their facilities ransacked by kids week in and week out. That's a blessing in ministry.
Absolutely. And speaking of the whole crying and dying thing, that one story before we wrap this up is we had gone on vacation, my mom and dad, I was a little kid, and probably wearing my red Roper boots that my people have heard all about, that I kicked the fire out of people with. And that church did a come forward for the children's ministry deal. And I'm Mr. ADD. I mean, I'm wired, I'm bouncing all over the place. Well, the pastor thought it was a good idea to give me one of those little clips, like a binder clip.
Okay.
And so I took that little clip and I put it on my ear and I screamed at the top of my lungs. And he said something very similar, like, y'all, don't get upset. He's fine. This is a sign that our church is doing well. We're healthy. Well, that's about it for us today. As always, we would appreciate it if you would leave us a good old 5-star review, and which you can find by searching on iTunes for Not Another Baptist Podcast. We also ask that you would connect with us on Facebook at Not Another Baptist Podcast, or on Twitter at NAB_podcast to stay up to date with what's happening on this train wreck. Until then, may your coffee be as black as night and as bold as a gospel you proclaim. And remember, folks, friends don't let friends eat pumpkin pie. Praise be to God.